Today on the Next, our guest is Jack Ramsey. Now, Jack is an interesting one. He grew up in Minnesota, played his high school hockey at Minnetonka. He then played in the juniors, went to University of Minnesota, where he was assistant captain his senior year, played a few years of pro hockey, and now he's got a day job working in tech. He color commentates for University of Minnesota hockey. He assistant coaches for Minnetonka, where he played his high school hockey. And by the way, Jack's dad is Mike Ramsey. And Mike, of course, had a long career in the NHL, played over 1,000 regular season games. He did some coaching in the NHL. He also was the youngest member of the 1980 U.S. gold medal hockey team that upset the Soviet Union. Now, I was really excited for this one because Jack's got such an interesting perspective. We talk about the Minnesota hockey landscape, what it was like growing up playing hockey in Minnesota, and how that's been evolving. We talk about how that compares to other parts of the world like New England, where I am. We talk about some of the changes in the sport, the increase in skill level, the increased specialization, the privatization of the sport, getting more expensive. We talk about burnout. We also just talk about some of the lessons learned that Jack's had looking backwards on his hockey career and how he thinks about the state of the sport, what's going well, some areas for improvement, and where some opportunities might be. And of course, we spent a bunch of time digging in on some of the ideas I'm thinking about, and Jack has some really excellent feedback as well and ideas for how a digital platform like the one I'm cooking up might be able to help kids and families and help grow the sport. At any rate, Jack Ramsey, welcome to the show.
I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. And we didn't do a prep call or anything. We got introduced through our mutual friend, Stephen Goldberg. And I understand you guys used to work together. And man, you have such an interesting background for the stuff I'm trying to learn about and what I'm thinking of doing. I mean, your dad was a legend in the game. You play the game at a very high level. You grew up in Minnesota, where I'm sitting here in Boston, and everyone talks about, the New England development model and the Minnesota development model, and there's just so much to cover. And yeah, your story would be awesome, your input will be awesome, and the discussion will go where it goes. But I'm just so grateful for you making the time to do it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on. Anytime I get the chance to talk hockey, talk development, any way we can impact the future of the game or anything, it's exciting and it's well used time. So thanks for having me on again.
Well, for starters, it'd be great just to get some color from you about how you first came into the game and what it was like growing up in the house of a legend and also in a hockey mecca like Minnesota and Chen Hassan specifically, right? Did I say that right?
Yep, yeah, you did. Yeah, it's playing hockey, you think it seemed unavoidable for me, right? Growing up in the household with who my dad was, for a little background, he had a long 15 plus NHL 15-year NHL career. Played for the 1980 Olympic team before that career, and then he coached for another.
Youngest guy on the team, right?
Yeah, youngest guy on the team is. It's pretty funny. Back when, we can go down so many avenues here, but back when he was playing college hockey, they used to have kind of JV teams, and I know he played the first almost half of the year on the JV team at the University of Minnesota as a freshman, and then the second half of the year he played on the actual college team, and then boom to the Olympic team. So, his stock grew rapidly, so it was pretty cool. But and then he had about 15 years of coaching the Minnesota Wild when they were brought back to Minnesota in 2000. So I was around hockey nonstop growing up. My sister as well. She played at the University of Minnesota and was an All-American.
Older sister?
Yep, oldest sister Rachel. So and then my other sister Hannah, can't forget about her, but she was the dance star in the in the family.
Which actually proves that it's not inevitable, right? I mean, you said it was inevitable, but like,
yeah.
You got one sister who didn't drink the Kool-Aid.
Right, and that's it's funny. And she maybe played hockey for 1 year and said, "Hey, this isn't for me. I'm going to do dance." And that was a great thing about my parents and my dad too. It was, a super supportive household. And if you wanted to be at the rink, if you wanted to go to the rink with him to the XL Energy Center where the Wild play on a Saturday or Sunday and go skate with him, you could. You had that option, but he wasn't forcing you to do that by any means. I played baseball. My sisters played other sports, growing up all the way to high school. So there's absolutely no pressure to be strictly focused on hockey. But I think I drank that Kool-Aid and I loved it and I wanted to be around it so much. And when you have an opportunity to go to the rink and be around pro players and get all this extra ice time, it's really hard to turn down. So all the time, whenever we'd have a school field trip to maybe go skiing or something like that, I'd go, no, I'm not going to go on the field trip. I'm just going to go to the rink with dad. So I get to skate for 3 hours by myself on, an NHL arena. So it was really cool growing up, being a coach's kid. And I know we're here to talk about all things hockey and development too. And that was such a huge impact on mine, is I could talk hockey 24/7 with a guy that was in an NHL locker room every single day. And when he was, taking me home from my game, he was never the guy to get in my ear and yell at me about my game, but he always wanted to talk about it. What did you see? What did you think? I think you could have done this and that. So I think from a really young age, I kind of looked at the game through a coach's mentality. And we can get into this more too, but I was a forward and a defenseman growing up, but I was more so a forward. I played forward in college, and I grew up with a defenseman coach as a dad. So that kind of, it's funny when I talk to him now about it. He's like, "Yeah, that kind of hurt you in the long run because I was always the high F3. I was always back, the first guy back, on the right side of the puck."
So here's a question. Would having a forward as a dad as a defenseman be a better thing than having a defenseman for a dad as a forward?
Yeah, I think so. I've never thought about
Little
that
Bobby
actually.
Orr, right?
Yeah, I do. I think that would have been pretty dang helpful, because these habits. Hey, you want the defensive defenseman, like, or you want the guy that's his first role is to play defense. But if he's ready to jump up and go, that's fantastic. But if you have a forward who his first step is back, he's not going to score a lot of goals, which that was kind of me. But I was always from, sports in high school and college. I was always one of the top penalty killers. But then that's how, I got to where I was in my career is I had a role I was really good at from when I was in high school and juniors, and I just stuck with that, and I was absolutely happy with that.
Huh. It's funny you say that because that sounds a lot. I mean, my kid's a little guy; he's only 13, but it sounds a lot like my kid. He's not showing up that much on the score sheet, but he's extremely responsible, kills all the penalties, right? So it'll be interesting to see his development path. But it's nice to know that people like him can end up playing the game at such a high level.
100%. And that's, I've coached a high school team in Minnesota at Minnetonka, and that's where I went to high school as well. The past 3 years, I've helped out with them, and I tell kids a lot is that, hey, penalty killers get scholarships too. Okay, those guys get drafted too, and if you're good enough at it, like you can carve out a career for it, absolutely. Because you look at these third and fourth line guys, you need them.
It's like the lacrosse face-off guy, Like
Yeah,
that's all you do. Like it's usually like a little midget too.
yeah, and that's, you got to think about that, junior teams and college teams. Okay, do we want to take this guy who's might put up some points on our third or fourth line, and we got to teach him how to penalty kill and teach him how to do this role, but he's not going to be happy in it. Or hey, we can take this guy. He's going to put up this amount of points, but he's going to be super happy. He's going to block shots. Like, I probably want that guy. We want to take that guy. He's not going to be a problem. So there's definitely a role that you can carve out, and I did it myself.
Now, growing up in the game and having all that access, I mean, it sounds like you were wagging your tail, and it was super cool. Did you aspire from a young age as well? Like, did you tell yourself as a little guy that you wanted to play in the NHL? Were you self-directed, or I guess how did that access and love of the game translate to a hunger for development?
Yeah, It's kind of interesting that you don't realize what you had until it's gone, kind of thing, almost. Getting, I think the biggest thing in my development was all that extra ice time, right? Where nowadays it can be really expensive to find extra hours and stuff like that, or mom and dad got to drive you here and drive you there, and it got to be a pain in the butt to get that extra ice time. And it was never that. It was just my dad. Hey, you want to go to the rink with me in the morning? You can probably get on the ice for 2 hours, and yeah, great. So I'd go do that, and then I'd watch practice. So that's another big thing was after skating, I get to watch these guys practice, or I get to watch the away team practice for a bit, and whether I realize it or not, but you're taking things in that you're watching on this NHL ice, and you're hearing these things that these coaches are saying. You're learning these terms and stuff as a young kid that other kids are not exposed to. Um, but it never, I don't think it ever set on me that, hey, I'm gonna play, I'm gonna play pro one day, or I'm gonna even play college one day. I guess I never thought about that. As a Gopher fan growing up and watched it, but I don't recall it ever being like, hey, I'm gonna play for them one day. I don't think it was until I got around to high school, and all of a sudden, some college teams start knocking on your door and sending you letters and stuff, and you're like, oh, hey, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna play college hockey, so now I'm gonna focus on this. I gotta figure out what school I want to go to, and then as you get closer to your senior year, you have NHL teams maybe talking to you and junior teams talking to you and going, oh, I could get drafted. I don't know if that means I'm gonna play in the NHL, but I'm gonna have the chance, right? So it was never, I guess I never put all my eggs in one basket that's what I was going to do. But it was just that I was set on that path from early on with the amount of ice time and exposure that I had, and it just went its course.
Well, I'm so curious to ask you. I mean, growing up, and I mean, I'm older than you, but even for you, relative to how it is today, it seems like there was a lot more like free range kids that were just out in the neighborhood and playing, and sports was a lot more just about kind of being in the moment and having fun and making memories. And now, youth sports has gotten so commercialized that the development paths keep. And I mean, it's not too different from like fashion. It seems like girls are wearing makeup younger and younger,
Yep.
and like everything's just happening earlier, right? And specialization, right? And training like a little D1 athlete when you're 9 years old, right? And I guess, what are your thoughts seeing the state of the ecosystem now relative to when you were coming up?
Yeah, it's flipped on its head completely, it seems. When I was growing up, everybody did multiple sports. I did baseball. I did tons of fishing. I'll count that as a sport. I put my time into so many other things, and I think it helps you become such a well-rounded athlete, just for coordination and learning all these other things, but helps you as a person too. I think that's very underrated now, is that parents are putting their kids in one sport, or kids are maybe doing their classes online, so they're not exposed to high school and different friends and groups and stuff like that. And you might have kids that you're about to ship off to juniors or college, and you go, man, I don't know if this kid's ready to go there yet, because I don't this kid's been taking their classes online, stuff like that. They don't have this big friend circle. Now you're going to send them out to the world, and good luck. Hopefully you land on your feet when you go to juniors or when you go to college. So I do think that the specialization has definitely hurt. And parents just burn out their kids a bit today. Even when I was growing up, I can think of a lot of guys that this was the best kid when we were in peewees or bantams or squirts, and they were just so hockey focused. And maybe one of those kids made it to college or the NHL, and all the other parents were like, well, hey, look, that mom and dad did that with that kid, like that's going to be our kid. Where in reality, 90% of those kids were burned out, and they never even made their high school team or never played after high school, because they just ended up losing their love of the game, and they're so burnt out from playing that one sport. So I think it is really important to get your kid into other sports. Um, build a big friend group and build a big level of interest. And then maybe when they get to high school, if they want to pick that one sport and kind of specialize in it, absolutely do it. That's what I did when I was a freshman in high school. I opted out of baseball and then I just focused on hockey for the next 4 years. But by that time, my best friend throughout high school, he never played hockey. He played baseball. He grew up right down the street. He wasn't a hockey guy. So I was able to build this big friend group. And I think that's really important for, mental development for all these kids growing up.
So as you started to dial in and get serious, what changed in terms of just how you carried yourself in the game and how the game fit into your life?
That's a good question. It definitely kind of takes over your life, which I can totally understand why kids get burnt out. Not saying that I did, but I hit freshman year and all of a sudden it's okay, I got to start doing some weight training and more off ice training, where it used to be I'm going 3, 4 days a week in the summer and just doing my summer skates, and maybe playing on my AAA team. That was kind of it. But now it's a bunch of off ice training, and I I always hated the weight room, which was really unfortunate. I had buddies who just loved being in the weight room and grinding doing that. I did not like that. So like that became a burden on me all of a sudden and kind of grinded my gears doing that. But it was definitely adding extra things to it, and it's definitely more of a burden to the parents too. You got to get your kids point A to point B, and they're always doing something after school. But way more off ice training, weightlifting, trying to shoot pucks, doing stick handling, and as you kind of hit that 14, 15, it's hey, the next 3, 4 years, it's all about development, and that's kind of the focus of your life then, I guess.
And when you were starting to switch gears and get serious, how much of the direction in terms of what you should do and how much you needed to do it, and are you making progress and things like that? Like, was it coming from you? Was it coming from your dad? Was it coming from your coach? Was it coming from your friends? And same question as you looked around at your buddies to the left and the right that were heading down a similar path. Like, what did you see from them as well, and how was that the same or different than your journey?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think by the time I was 14 or 15, and I lucked out being at Minnetonka High School. When I was a sophomore and junior there, I think we had 9 Division I players on my sophomore year team, and then my junior year team we had 7 Division I players. So I was, and the Lake Conference is what it's called in Minnesota, is the Edina, Eden Prairie. They produce tons of Division I players and NHL talent. So
So
I
some
was
some good playoff hockey here too, right?
exactly, yes, you got the playoff hockey here, yeah, 100%. So I was super fortunate to be surrounded by all this future talent. Um, and I grew up training at Impact Hockey, and so I think the big thing was going there and skating there 4 times a year. Is I was 4 times a week. I was on the ice with 15 to 20 other Division I players and guys that would go on to play pro. Where some of my buddies that were my age that were still playing some other sports or weren't super hockey focused were maybe going a couple of days a week, and they were playing in the lower level at that training, and they're just playing with other high school kids who they're going to be good high school players, but they weren't in that level of Division I players. So it was iron sharpens iron kind of thing every single day of the week with all these guys. So growing up in an area with a hockey hotbed of talent helps immensely, on ice and off ice, that you're surrounded by these guys that have this focus. Kind of when guys hit high school, you have some friends that, maybe some guys start drinking or doing other stuff, and they kind of get off track, and that can pull some guys in. And I was just lucky to have this group of guys that just wanted to focus on hockey, be good buddies, and not partake in any of that stuff. And we were just focused on what we wanted to do.
Uh-huh. And as you were diving in and getting serious, was your dad still pretty hands off and kind of there if you needed him, or was he working to keep the train on the tracks as those distractions started seeping in, and some of your buddies were maybe not making the smartest decisions or getting derailed?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, my dad was always there. It's funny, growing up, he was on the road for quite a bit of time, and he's coaching, so he wasn't at a ton of my youth hockey games as well. So it was a lot of times it was in the summer where he was going to those games for me, and watching that, and we're talking through hockey and watching hockey and getting that development. But he was never on me, this is what you got to do. But I mean, I think my parents were the perfect level of strict growing up. I lucked out on that so much that they weren't, you got to be here, you got to do this, you got to do that. They weren't like that, but they also weren't not checking it on me, So it's tough. Everything impacts a
I
kid's
call that the
development.
Goldilocks level,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah, not too much, not too little, just right.
yeah, and I got super lucky with that, and they raised me into the person that I am, and I think that has such an impact on kids' development that I can think of guys that had a lot of talent in high school and stuff, but they got more interested in, maybe drinking or drugs and girls, and they just kind of threw it away. They never even ended up playing high school hockey kind of thing. And then there's parents that are so strict, that they want to rebel. So I know it's kind of off topic from actual hockey development, but it's your personal life development, and it definitely impacts you as a person and a player on the ice too. So
And if I remember, I mean, we haven't spoken before, but we were texting a little bit. You do not have kids, right?
no, no, do not right now.
Got it. Well, so maybe your answer will change, if and when you do. But I'm going to ask it anyways, because it's something I wrestle with as a dad, right? How do you balance like leaving the kids to go find their passions with like providing that direction, and then working as hard as they want to versus like guiding them and giving them the structure to make sure that they put their best foot forward to learn good habits and reach their full potential. Like, I don't know. I mean, you can certainly speak to it as a kid, as a son who was raised by by parents and ended up going through the development path and playing the game at a pretty high level. Like, reflecting backwards, what do you think about for if and when you end up having kids of your own?
Yeah, I think a few things that I took from my parents and things that I see today is, um, as a parent and as a kid, your kid has to understand the time and money that you're putting into them. I think at times I thought, hey, I get to go to these 4 hockey sessions, they're free. I'm just going to train at these. Like, my parents don't have to pay for this kind of thing. No, and when I was probably getting into high school, 14 or 15, I didn't, I remember there was one week I didn't want to go to the skate. I'd already signed up. I didn't want to go to the next day. And my dad's like, well, I already paid for it. And I was like, well, I don't want to go. He's like, okay, well, if you pay me for the session, you don't have to go. And I was like, all right, well, I got my lawn mowing money, Okay, here's the $40 for my hour of ice time. Like, I'm not going to go. And then that made me realize, okay, there's some value to, what my parents are putting forth there. And then that motivated me not to skip, and made me realize that they're putting this time and money and effort into it. So I think kids do need to realize that, especially in today when the cost of ice is going up and the cost of training and stuff is going up, that your kids should realize and you should talk through, like, hey, this is costing me money. So when you are out there, it's 100% effort. We're not driving 40 minutes and for you to skate or play a game for you to just play half-ass. This is 100% effort. Mom and dad are doing this, and this is for you. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. We won't do it next year. But I think they got to realize that if you're going to be there, it's 100% effort.
Now, if I recall, if I look in New England, for example, I mean, when I was coming up in the game in New England, there were barely any clubs, but now it's like almost all clubs, right? And town still exists, but it's just been, I think, it's in competition with the clubs, right? And the clubs make it really hard for town to
Yeah.
thrive because if you don't put the club over town, you don't stay on the club, and it's cutthroat, and there's a bunch of other kids that are waiting for your slot, right? And in Minnesota, my understanding is that it's quite different than that. So, what did the landscape look like for you coming up? And to the extent you're still active in the game today. I'm not sure, but what is the current state of Minnesota hockey, and how is it different?
Yeah, I think it gets highlighted a lot for a few reasons. One, affordability. I think at the youth hockey level is it's so much more affordable to play in the Minnesota hockey model because it's community based, and kids are growing up from um, mites, in that's kindergarten, first grade, et cetera, all the way up to high school in the same program. I played for the Minnetonka Skippers, and very, very proud of that. And all the guys around us are very proud to have played for their high school. That's the dream growing up, and I was very fortunate, that we had um, so many Division I players that we could watch when we were kids, and guys that Jake Gardner, Justin Hall, like just a quick couple guys that played in the NHL, that guys that you can look at when you're younger, when you're in middle school and go, gosh, I want to be that guy. Like he is a hero to all these kids. And anyways, you grow up through that youth model, and you play with your same buddies from when you're in first grade, until you're in high school, and it's really magical. And then in the summer, you might go and play in your AAA teams, and guys might go and play baseball. But when fall rolls back around, it's the same group of guys coming back together, going, okay, what can we do this year? And it's really awesome. It builds really strong communities, I think. And again, it's so much more affordable, and it's not as cutthroat, right? There's so many teams that you can play on. If you don't make the high school team, you have the JV team. If you don't make the JV team, then you have junior gold A, junior gold B, and that's still Minnetonka. You're still playing for your community. So even if you don't make the highest level, you're not getting cut and having to go a town over and find a different AAA team. There's a team for everybody, and I think that's really, really important, for guys to be able to do.
How close are you to the current landscape in youth hockey in Minnesota?
Yeah, so I've been coaching at Minnetonka the past 3 years, helping
Oh yeah,
helping
I didn't
them
know
out. Yep,
that.
yeah. So I'm still involved, and a lot of the guys and a lot of coaches in the Metro, are alumni for that school. Right now, we have, I think, every single guy in our coaching staff at Minnetonka played at Minnetonka, growing up, and you look at a lot of the
Is
other ones around there.
Minnesota just one of those places people don't leave?
It is. It is, and I know people talk about states like that, but it's so funny. Like being at the University of Minnesota, and we have guys coming from. Usually it's mainly Minnesota guys, but you do have your one-offs from Eric Shearhorn. He's a goalie from Alaska. We have a guy from Michigan. They stay here, and especially if they want to get into hockey. And the alumni network is really big in Minnesota too. So it's like, well, why would I leave? I have all these business opportunities if I want to get into this, or I want to get into this. Like there is an alumni that works in it that can help you. So um, a lot of people who come here stay here. A lot of people that go back to their high school and coach it. And we're fortunate. Myself, Stevie Johnson, he played professional. He played at the University of Minnesota. He coaches the high school team with me. Steve Aronson, he was the first ever free agent signing in the Minnesota Wild, and he was a Division III player at the time. He coaches the team, and he coached me when I was in high school. So he's been doing it for 15, 20 years, which is awesome. And Sean Goldsworthy, he's got Division III coaching experience, and he's the head coach at Minnetonka. So they're the coaches in high school hockey at these bigger schools. They're not just these random high school teachers or mom and dads. They are very, very good coaches with very long hockey experience. So I think that's motivation for kids to stay too, because they are going to learn and develop underneath them. They're not just playing 30 games a year. They're actually going to learn quite a bit before they go off to juniors or college.
And I mean, you talk about the community model versus the privatized model here in New England, but actually, the club cost is small relative to the privatization of all the extra stuff, right?
Yes. Yeah.
The lessons and the shooting and the strength and the shift reviews and sports psychologists, and now agents are seeping into the picture at younger and younger ages, right? Like, are you seeing similar in Minnesota, and what is that doing to the affordability and accessibility, if so?
Yeah, it is and it isn't, I would say, because um, during the during the season, we're lucky at our high school, and I know this might be, for only the top 20 to 25 high schools. There could be 100 high schools that don't have access to the resources that we do. But personally speaking, you know, we have a video app. Guys can go on their, computer when they get home and review their shifts for the high school team, and it's not costing them extra money. And we have pregame video and stuff, on Wednesdays and on Fridays. So um, that's unique to some high schools doing that. So we try to provide as much as we can to the players that are here without them having to pay more out of pocket. And then they're able to skate in the summer skates for their high school. So that's nice. They don't have to necessarily go outside and get different get different ice and pay for that. But obviously, guys are paying for their AAA teams and whatnot like that. But at the end of the day, yes, you have your skating coaches and your strength coaches, and this is, I'll say, for the higher end, but it is guys that are maybe just going to end up playing D3 or play club, like they're being forced to pay these guys too, and it is a bit crazy. I don't think it's necessary as well to pay $4,000 in the summer for a skating coach. Is it going to take your kid to the next level and put them in the NHL? Probably not. Is it going to help them? Absolutely, but it's just not necessary. So I think it's tough when guys get highlighted that they did X, Y, and Z, and look at where they are now. You can look at so many other guys that did not do those things that also got there. Now, takes a lot of luck and a lot of hard work, but I don't think parents need to shell out 20,000, 15,000 a year on all these different things to get their kid to the next level.
And so for me, I mean, the game was a big part of my life growing up, but I mean, I barely made, I quit Division 3, 2 games into sophomore year. I really didn't have my head screwed on straight. I was one of those guys that the distractions seeped in, and I embraced those distractions.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and in a way, I mean, that was fun, right? But I have a lot of regrets in terms of not that I think I would have gone far in the game, but I just, I didn't reach my own potential wherever that may have been. But also, I mean, now I feel like in some ways I'm learning the game for the first time because the game's evolved so much and because it's just so much more sophisticated in terms of the coaching and systems and access and development path and things like that. But I am curious just how much in terms of the development path is nature, right? Like how much of it is just like, well, you're Mike Ramsey's kid and therefore you have good genetics, son, right? Versus nurture, like you're Mike Ramsey's kid and like you got carted around to the rink and saw all
Right.
that, you had all this access and it was like through osmosis, it was just like, it was just around you all the time, right? And then same thing as it relates to physical attributes versus mental attributes, right? Because there's talk about like, well, hey, that's a little guy, but like he, his grit and compete levels like nothing I've ever seen, and that kid's going to go far, right? He's gonna prove all the critics wrong because he just wants it more than anybody else, right? Like how much of each of those things, the physical and the mental, is nature versus nurture, in your experience?
Yeah, and it can be, hypocritical for me, I think, to say, hey, these kids don't need to go out do these extra skating lessons, yada yada yada. They'll get there. But I was getting, 20 extra hours a week of ice time for free just by myself. Now, there's that's one thing to say too, is when I had all those extra hours of ice time at the X, we call it, I was skating by myself, with 50 pucks. I was not given any drills. My dad wasn't going, hey, do this, do that. Didn't have anybody out there. I might have another coach or another player's kid come out or my sister come out and skate with me, but we're just skating around for 2 hours and shooting pucks and just being on the ice. So I think that's one thing, is you don't necessarily need all that direction. Extra ice time helps. Just being on your skates, you're going to become a better skater. Now, if you have a coach, will that speed that process up? Yes, probably. Um, uh, but I think of other guys, the Schultz family that I grew up with. They produced three Division I players out of four boys, um, and they would go to the rink with me too in the mornings. And Jimmy Schultz, he's still playing. He was in the Sharks system this year. He played 7 or 8 NHL games for them. So they didn't have access to ice in the way that I did, but they had an ice rink in their backyard, and those guys put as much time on the ice that I did, without instruction or development. They were just on the ice. So I think um, you can nurture your kid by giving them access to ice time. I think it probably was nature, genetics definitely plays a big part, right? If your kid's 5'3" at 18 years old, it's probably going to be tough for them to crack into the bigger leagues. Granted, we are seeing the game get smaller, now and faster, so that's a good thing. But I just think that if you provide ice time to these kids, they're going to develop, whether it's at an outdoor rink. And I'm curious, out east, are there a lot of outdoor public rinks in kind of like that? Like I had one 5 minutes from my house growing up. My dad would drive me down there. I'd skate for 3 hours, and then I would just walk home after. What's that
The weather's
availability?
too inconsistent. It's too inconsistent. Like I mean, we put a backyard rink in, not with chillers or anything, but just the last several years, and the 2 years before this one, so not this current one, but the 2 years before it, there wasn't enough sustained cold to justify it. This year, there was enough sustained cold to justify it, but my kids are so overscheduled that we weren't around to enjoy it anyways, right? So because I just assumed it was going to be another inconsistent year, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, it's hard. Like without chillers in the Northeast, it's hard, and I feel like it's getting harder with climate change too.
yeah, yeah. That is tough, and I think that's the Minnesota model too, and just our weather, and that we get lucky being in this area too. It's very similar to Canada, and kids in Canada is that you're going to have a public rink within 10 minutes walking distance of your house. That's kind of everywhere here. So you can always find access to ice. Now I'm not telling parents to, get in their car and move to Minnesota or Canada, but that is, I think, we develop a lot of kids, and I think they just have access to so much free ice. So if you want it, it's there for the taking, and if those kids really want it, they're gonna be on the ice doing that. So I think that's definitely a thing where kids get nurtured, and they have all this free ice time. It helps them a lot.
Uh-huh. I don't have the stats on it, but it sure seems like if you look at the Division I rosters, there's a lot of last names that you recognize from their dads, right? Um, why do you think that is?
I think it's definitely it's genetics for sure. You can't ignore that, but it is just the coaching from a young age, and these habits are getting instilled into kids at a very young age. Where
Hmm.
um, if you're 8 years old and you understand the game better than Bobby John over there, well, your coaches are going to trust you, and you're going to get more ice time. So you're going to play more. You're going to get more opportunities. Um, and I think that just carries on as you get older. If you're ahead on the learning curve of these other kids because of these parents that have played the game and can instill all these habits and reinforce those habits, um, it's going to go a long way, because coaches don't see everything at the youth level, when you're out on the ice. But when you get off the ice and you're my kid, and I saw that, well, you're maybe lacking effort or doing this wrong. We'll talk about it on the car ride home. Parents will talk about that. But if you have parents that maybe never played the game and are watching their kid, they're just watching them play hockey. They're not picking up these things, and they can't necessarily help them. So I think that is why they just get so far ahead of kids at a young age from that coaching from their parents.
Yeah, I really wrestle with this one because on the one hand, you hear the stories about people whose paths were, you know, free range, and they were, little Timmy was just out self-directed because he was obsessed with the game and wanted to be in the NHL since he was in diapers, right? And it came from nowhere because his parents were like,
Right.
an electrician and a teacher or whatever, right? But like Timmy just knew, right? And the parents never played a sport in their life, right? Or they were, the dad was a football star or something, right? But he just knew hockey was his thing, right? But then you hear other stories of like of kids who, maybe love who the structure and the access and the guidance and the nurturing and the Goldilocks of like, strict enough but not too strict, right? Ended up like keeping the train on the tracks until the kid ultimately matured enough to take over and spread his or her wings on their own, right? And so it's like, what's right? And it sure seems like the answer is it depends, and it's kid specific, right? But it's confusing, and one of my hypotheses that I'm trying to explore in terms of like what will actually build here is that, to your point about the access and the teaching from the earliest ages, if you don't have parents that played the game at the highest levels, or you don't live in an area that has the density of the best coaching and skills and all that stuff, or you do but you can't afford it, or you do but don't have parents that can be human Uber drivers and have jobs that can accommodate carting your butt around to all this stuff, right? Or you have access in your area, but you have parents that don't know how to seek it out and don't know what to look for or what you need, right?
Yep.
Then could there be a platform, right, that can essentially fill in some of those gaps and kind of grease the skids for you to help you on your path? And that could come from direction, that could come from guidance, that could come from helping you understand your progress over time. That could come from making it fun, enabling you to challenge your buddies when you're sitting at home. It could come from, learning from your heroes, right?
Yep.
There's a lot of different ways it could come, but just like, could there be a digital platform to kind of grease the skids in some way? I know that's super generic and undefined, but what's your reaction to that?
No, I mean that's great, and that's why you're doing this, right? Is to brainstorm ideas. And as you're talking there, I'm kind of thinking of ideas, and the one I think about immediately is that you're talking about these kids whose parents, I think maybe like the Connor Bedard's, like parents might have not played hockey, but from a young age, boom, this kid's going. This kid is him. And those parents worked their butts off to get that kid from point A to point B, driving everywhere, right? And to figure that stuff out.
But that's not what you hear. Like when you hear about the Bedard documentaries or whatever, you just hear the parents say, "Oh, like
He knew from
if we couldn't find him and he was just in the back,
Yeah.
And like the neighbors, like, yep, like we just got used to the constant banging 24/7 because it was always just like Bedard in the backyard shooting puck, right? So it's like you kind of wonder like how much of it is like the stuff of legends versus the actual reality of how the story went.
Yeah, I think that's what produces those kids too, is they're nuts from a young age, right? Is they are like that's why those players are so rare, because those kids are so rare. Like they're
But
crazy.
is it the kid? Like, what was the parents' role though? Like,
You don't know what they're actually. I know Mitch Marner. You've seen the videos of his dad. His dad was wild on filming him, yelling at him all over. So that there's those kind of things. But you're talking about, maybe parents that have no clue what path to put their kid on, but their kid wants it. That can be something that you provide, that, these are recommendations for maybe this area, or these are the steps for this age, to provide these kids these things. Hey, how much does your kid want it? Like want to play hockey, want to train. Are they a 10? Are they a nut job? They want to do this stuff. Okay, well, here's some recommendations for things that they can do. Do you have no idea what you're doing, but your kid likes hockey? They're a 7. Okay, well, here's some things that they can do. Here's some resources that they can go. These are where you can sign up. So I think there's a lot of different avenues that you can go down, right? For sure. And I think that's something, is to help these parents that maybe don't understand the game or haven't been around the game. Because that's probably a majority of kids playing hockey, is that their parents didn't go far in the sport, right? So they don't necessarily know. But you can help them down that path. That could be something you look into.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't know enough to know if this is true or not, but I was talking to an NHL player development person, and I won't mention any names just in because I don't have the permission to do so. But what they were saying was that their impression is that the proliferation of all these skills coaches all over the place, right? Like that's a relatively new phenomenon, and that there's a lot of ice and activity, right? But not a lot of like assessment, teaching, recommendations for improvement. And actually, there's the role for those things in terms of actually driving outcomes is underrated. And whether it's teaching the kid directly or even coaching the coach, right?
Yep.
It's just, kind of, and less around, I mean, sure, I guess you could also look at this around like coaching and systems, but like, I'm just talking about like the player's development path, right? Like looking at reviews of or watching their film and seeing what they're good or not, and then actually having personalized development to help them specifically with the things that they need to work on. I mean, part of it's also a bandwidth thing, right? Is that like the skills coaches are just trying to stay on the treadmill of like utilization rates of the expensive ice, right? And the coaches are trying to do this across a whole roster of kids, right? Let alone, and they just, they don't even have the bandwidth for their own kid, let alone everyone else's kid, right? So it's almost like a platform that's centered around the kid and their development path. I mean, that's another kind of angle I'm thinking about.
Yeah, and I mean that topic opens a whole can of worms of skills coaches, development coaches, agents, advisors. I think the whole thing is watered down for sure. I think a lot of them, a scary amount of them, are just in it to make money. They're going to go there and they're going to coach your kid. They're going to try to develop your kid. But as to if they actually can compared to these other guys, I don't know. So I think a lot of people have seen the opportunity to make money off of this big push to get your kid better and are just trying to make money off of it. I have a buddy, one of my best friends in the Twin Cities, is an advisor, and he's gotten into it the past year and a half, and I've gone back and forth on whether I like it or not, because I talked to him and I'm like, okay, you have this kid playing in this location. He's not that good of a hockey player. He's not, at best case, he's going to play Division III. Okay. That's best case. Likely he's not going to play college hockey anywhere. But I'm like, you took him on as an advisor. Why is that? Just to make money, or what are you providing this kid? And he said, well, when I talk to him and I talk to his parents, I see where he wants to get, and I'm open and honest with him that this is best case, and I will open these doors to try to get him to that. And I go, okay, I understand that. That's fine. If you're going to do that and be open and honest. But I talk to him and I go, there's so many advisors now, like, tell me about the landscape. And so many of them are guys that never even played hockey past high school. And they're advising these kids on where to go for juniors and where to go here. And they don't actually have these relationships with coaches to open doors or get tryouts. And I think parents need to be super careful when you're signing up for skills development, skating coaches, advisor. Do your background and make sure they're not just selling snake oil, right? You really have to do your research on it. Is this person going to actually help my kid, and is it going to be worth the money that I'm going to spend? Because all this stuff costs a lot of money.
Yeah, no, and that, I mean, that brings up kind of a related thing I've been wrestling with, which is, what do you think about the hockey path in terms of reclassing, in terms of juniors, in terms of 21-year-old freshmen, in terms of Zoom school, in terms of missing, 30 Fridays, probably 20 Thursdays as well, right?
Yep.
I mean, do you worry that the hockey path is increasingly at odds with the life path in some ways, unless you are the Bedard, the Celebrini, the
Hmm.
kind of the one in a million kind of kid.
Yeah, it's a great question. It does worry me. I kind of touched on it at the start that we have all these kids in online classes and they're not making real relationships or friend groups. And you have the guys that do that and they go and play Division I hockey and so be it. But I do think when they step into the real world, they're not going to have the relationship skills um, to walk into an office for a job interview compared to the guy that was in class making friends, doing all this stuff. I think that stuff is very important because hockey is only such a short part of your life. So you have to develop these relationship skills and these life skills too to do that. But I do it does scare me. I mean, I played juniors my senior year and year after in Penticton, British Columbia. So that was a big thing for me of leaving home and going and growing up and developing these relationship skills because I went to school in Canada in person. I had to make friends in a Canadian school my senior year when it was
Did you
pretty
bill it,
scary.
or did you like
I,
where did you
yep,
stay? You
yep.
billeted?
I was with the billet. Yep. Um,
There
and
should
I
be like a whole just like podcast with like billet stories.
Oh my God. Yeah, you could. You'd probably have to like black out people's faces for certain stories though and blur boys there and whatnot. So for some of those stories,
I
but
bet bunch of non-hockey people listening are probably Googling right now,
what's a billet?
what is a billet? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. What's a billet? What's it like to have a 17 or 18-year-old strange kid in my home? Well, yeah, exactly. There's some stories from buddies and stuff. Holy smokes, yeah, you could do a whole another podcast on it. But I do think um, it is kind of lowering the maturity level of hockey players um, for sure. It's just odd in a sense. You look at younger guys with maybe even media now. You kind of see these young guys in the NHL or juniors and college doing media, and they just seem a little awkward, a little tense, like they don't have those social skills. I'm like, all this stuff is
It's not as
connected.
bad as like the synchronized TikTok dances in uniform.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, you have guys doing that now too, right? So
And you
it
know they
has,
don't want to. They're just doing it for the NIL dollars.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It is.
So like, let me build up my following so that I'll be more marketable, so that I can get brands interested. I'm
Yeah.
assuming. I don't know. I mean, I'm not. I mean, my world is still around the teenagers. I don't deal much with the college kids now, but I could imagine that NIL has changed things a lot. I've certainly heard that.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean the but overall the junior landscape is it's we're going to go through the biggest change I don't even know since when with major junior now and the backlash that this is going to have because there's going to be a lot of Division I capable players that would have been capable of playing Division I in previous years. U.S. kids, I'm saying, that are probably they're going to have to go play D3, and then that it's just going to bump kids down. There's going to be kids that were playing D3 that are going to now have to go now play club, and there's going to be
Hmm.
club kids that are never going to play hockey again,
Hmm.
all because of this. And I'm not complaining about that. That's just the reality of it. I think I like the switch. I would love college hockey to grow. There needs to be another, 10, 12 Division I teams because there is the talent to fill those teams, especially with how this is going to go. But it's going to be interesting to see kids now maybe skipping out on their senior year of high school to go play a major junior for a year, or they're going to go to the USHL, and then they're going to go to major junior, and then they're going to go to college, um, which I think could be good in the sense of we're talking about kids' development off ice and personality wise, maturity. I think it's great for kids to go different places and see that.
Except that all the rest of the kids that go to those colleges that aren't athletes or aren't hockey kids are going to be 18.
Yeah, that's not going to change, right? I mean, that's how it has been. I was a 19 turning 20-year-old freshman. I mean, I was 20 in November of my freshman year. My roommate turned 21. So that was kind of interesting that yes, we're living in dorms with 18-year-olds and my roommate can legally go to the bar. Um, I remember our RA came to knock on our door our first semester and she said, you guys have to do your monthly meeting with me. We have to talk about roommate relationships and yada yada yada. And we were just like, hey, we're older than you. Can you just sign off on this? Like I think we're okay. Like we have a year or two on you. Like let's. She said, okay, yeah, that's fine. I get that.
That could be one of those comedy hockey skits on TikTok,
Yeah,
acting out that scene.
yeah. It was
Like
pretty
I've
funny.
seen that. I forget the guy's name, but there's a guy that does those clips where it's like, hockey players going to class in college, and it's like,
Yeah,
they teach.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
It it was interesting, and there for me, I benefited I was more mature than other freshmen. We had guys that were true freshmen, that didn't go to juniors or something, that might not have had to kind of go live on their own for a little bit. And you saw that they were, I'm not going to say they were immature, because they're an 18-year-old freshman. They're exactly what a college freshman is, right? Trying to figure out life as you go. But some colleges, they want their kids focusing on hockey, school, and weight training. They don't want their kids necessarily trying to figure out how to live life. So I think that is a benefit of going and playing juniors. But it is, it's the one sport that you can have 20 and 21-year-old freshmen. So it is, it's definitely unique.
another thing I wanted to ask you about, as parents and as kids, right? You've got all these clips from Kobe Bryant and similar in your ear about like, if you outwork those extra hours every day, turn into hours every week, turn into hours every month, turn into hours every year, and they compound. And over time, you'll get further and further and further, right? But then what you were just talking about, right, is one, like, the game's going to end and then you have a long life ahead of you, but also burnout, right? And
Yep.
so, what's your advice in terms of whether you're a parent trying to give guidance to your kid, or whether you're a kid who's trying to take hockey as far as they can in terms of managing that balance?
Yeah, it's a good question. You kind of gotta go off of each individual kid. I think a parent, and I don't have kids. You tell me, but can you tell when your kid looks burnt out at the end of the week from all the activities that you put them
He's
through?
not shy. He's not shy. Neither one of them. He has a little sister too. She's not a hockey kid, but she plays sports, just different sports. But yeah, neither one of them is shy. But yeah, no, I can definitely tell.
Yeah, so I think parents need to have an open conversation and relationship with that. Is that, am I pushing my kid too hard? They need to be able to tell me. They can't be afraid
Mm-hmm.
to tell me this.
Mm-hmm.
That's the last thing you want, right? Is your kid being afraid to tell their parents that they're burnt out. And there's definitely parents that do intimidate their kids to that point, I would say. But it's, maybe it's different activities too. Instead of pushing them to go do this thing, or maybe go watch video, have your kid sit on the couch and watch an NHL game with you, and turn that into a bonding moment. And that's something we didn't kind of turn it. It's something we didn't really touch on too. And I've talked with friends that I think the IQ level of hockey is going down, but the skill level is going up.
Oh yeah, no, that's another soundbite that you hear a lot of.
Yeah, and it's I think the older coaches, and I'm not necessarily an older coach, I guess, but people are just watching TikTok hockey, and you're just watching highlights, and you're just watching clips. And you go, well, McDavid did this. I saw this 15-second clip of him. I'm going to do this. Or I saw McKinnon do this, or McCarr do this. And these kids aren't getting the whole game. The only source of hockey they're getting are these clips. Kids don't watch hockey games these days, and that's a big issue. In that, watch a full hockey game with your kid. Tell them, hey, don't watch the puck. Look at all the other things on the ice, and tell me what you see. And I think that goes such a long way in development for kids. And they don't have to do anything. They're sitting on the couch watching it, but in watching a full hockey game and watching different pieces of the game instead of just watching, TikTok clips and Instagram clips of hockey goes a long way.
Can hockey IQ be taught in a classroom setting, or is it just like game situations only, either watching or playing?
I do think it can be taught. I really do. you have kids coming into the high school level, and you want to talk about a 1-3-1 forecheck, or a push down penalty kill or something like that. These are all things that I knew when I was 10, right? But other kids didn't figure this out until they were 16, going to high school. And those are things that I just watched and my dad taught me about. And I don't think you necessarily need an NHL coach to be able to teach those. You can look at a screen and read about it or be shown examples. And I think that can go a long way. Now, implementing it on the ice is one thing. Knowing it in your head and knowing where you have to be and what it looks like on ice level is different. So it definitely takes a combination of the two. But I do think you can save ice time. You only have an hour of ice for practice. That's precious time. You don't want to spend 15 minutes of it slowly walking through, hey, what this looks like, and now you only have 45 minutes left to actually practice it. I think though there are a lot of things system-wise that you can talk through off ice on a whiteboard and teach kids that you can boom go implement on ice.
Uh-huh. Do you, how do you think about shift reviews? Are they valuable for players?
I think they are. I really do. It really wasn't until I got to pro. I mean, we had individual video and line video and stuff like that in college, but it wasn't until pro that I had an iPad and I could go home and I could watch all my shifts. And when I went to pro, I switched from a forward to a defenseman, which is another whole thing. So my first year.
Sounds like you should have done that years before.
I think that's my dad says if I would have done that years before, I'd still be playing hockey right now. I wouldn't. That's one thing. So, but it is helpful to see from bird's eye view, because you went into this shift and you thought this was your option. You saw this, and coach came back to the bench and told you this, and you're like, no, this is the option I had. Then you go look at it in film and go, oh, okay, I see what he's talking about. I had that guy behind me. I didn't shoulder check. I didn't know. Okay, I'm going to really work on shoulder checking tomorrow, or work on this. I think video review gives you really good things to work on. Gives you habits to work on. You need to work on your wall play because of that and this and that. So.
Uh-huh. So a few ideas I've been thinking about that I'm just curious to spitball, and we just passed an hour, so I won't keep you too much longer. But one is, do you know Peloton? Like
Yep.
the exercise bike, and
Yep.
and how they took like the boring exercise bike that all the hockey kids were supposed to sit on for 30 or 60 minutes or whatever, and like wrap an experience around it and make it more like a soul cycle class, right? So imagine doing similar but with shift review, where it's either your shifts or it could just be watching another game, and with a group of kids sitting at home with a teacher walking through and marking up the screen and teaching hockey IQ. So that's one idea. I'll stop there. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's important. I'd be interested to see how it would go in a multiple person setting. Whose shifts are you reviewing? Are you reviewing NHL video? Are you reviewing one team and you have these 5 guys there? How is that going to work? I do like the idea of watching shifts for maybe an NHL game. You just play a clip and you go, okay, guys, what'd you see there? Or what were the things? I think it's important for and this is another thing that parents don't know hockey, that you could help them, because I think teaching parents is beneficial to them teaching their kids of, here's 10 bullet points. I want you to look for these things in this game. I want you to say it out loud, or notice when they're doing this forecheck, or somebody has a good stick, or doing this push down. Like, it's beneficial to look for those individual things and really see what it looks like, instead of just kind of also just watching it. So I think watching those clips and highlighting stick position, push down, positioning, all this stuff is really important. Kids can benefit from it.
Another one I'm thinking about is a digital platform that not only does shift review for you, but then designs a personalized development plan of stuff to work on in between.
That I think that would be a winner right there. Now, how you do it? Would it be AI? Would you have a full workforce of people reviewing shifts?
Hmm.
and doing this. That's a thing that some advisors are doing. Some advisors are doing video review with guys, and I give my buddy
I see
crap.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're starting to hire like you know, quote unquote advisors that actually are just player development people, right?
exactly. And I give my buddy crap because I'm like, why aren't all of you guys doing video? You're an advisor. You guys should be doing video review for all of your kids. Like, if I were to ever become an advisor, that's probably priority number two behind trying to open doors for you guys is we got to do video review for these kids because that's the biggest impact that those advisors can actually have on those kids. And then that goes back into the thing of advisors that never played hockey at a high level. Are they going to be able to actually help you with that?
Uh huh. Another one is almost like long tail skills. So imagine a class and taught by a real instructor, but maybe the instructor's Bedard teaching the Bedard shot, right? Or maybe it's only a face-off class, right?
Yep.
But it's taught by like some of the best face-off people in the game, right? So and think about like what are the long tail skills that it's really important to work on that you would never just like spend the valuable time at a practice working on, but then it's like when do you work on them? By the way, like how are you working on them? Like what are you going to go on YouTube and like find a clip? Like what if
Right.
there was someone that could actually see you do it and give you counsel even if it's remote?
Yeah, I like those individual skills being taught like that, especially face-offs. They're such an underrated part of the game in professional hockey. Huge thing. Who has possession in college hockey? But growing up, it's kind of tough for a coach who was maybe never a centerman to teach face-offs. Even now, after practices, I'll want to work with the forwards on face-off because we were piss poor the previous game on face-offs. I was never a center, so I'm like, I don't necessarily know the tips or tricks or something like that to help you guys. So those things would go a long way, especially for kids and especially for I think coaches too. How to help your kids get better on faceoffs. How to you can have this can definitely be player oriented, but I think you can also have a coach oriented portion as well.
Well, yeah, I mean that's another. It's like the long tail of like coach the coaches, right? You could do a session for coaches, or a session for scouts, or a session for agents, or
Yeah.
session for player development people, whatever. That feels like a distraction today for where we're thinking because it's hard enough to just get it right for the player, right? But directionally, that's certainly an expansion path. Another nugget that I observed that I don't know what to do with yet, but I want to mention to you in case you have ideas is I was speaking to a longtime NHLer who recently left the game. He has young kids. He didn't want to do the grind anymore, right? And he is an agent now, but he loves the game and he likes being active in the development, but he can't be a road warrior. So he's doing some in-person skills, but he wants to be able to do it from anywhere, right? He has a house an hour up north, right? And he said, I'm seeking purpose. A lot of guys that leave the game, they're seeking purpose. They want to stay close to the game, but they want to have the flexibility to work when they want to work from wherever they want to work.
Yep.
Right. And they don't want to, they don't want it to mess with their family or their semi-retired lives. So you have all those people. Then you have all the crazy youth hockey people that are like, trying to accelerate and make their development paths as effective and efficient as possible. What
Yep.
do you do with that?
I mean, gosh, if I were him, I'm creating a website and I'm doing a video review company. It
Uh-huh.
depends on who he wants to work with. Is his goal to have an income? Is
Mm-hmm.
his goal to I want to impact NHL players or I want to impact youth players or just the game in general? Do you want to do
Mm-hmm.
both? You
Mm-hmm.
could charge X amount of dollars for a video session and people just sign up. They bring their clips. A lot of these teams and organizations have their video that these kids can pull themselves, right? And they can send it to them. You can do, hey, we're going to do an hour meeting or ship me your video ahead of time. I'm going to review it and I'm going to have all the X's and O's broken down. And we're going to do a video review session. So I think for a guy that wants to do something like that, that's a good opportunity is to do a video review session. I know a lot of these skating coaches in Minnesota. There's not a ton of them, but they do skating classes with youth players and NHL players, and then during the season they also do video review with the NHL players on their skating and stuff like that. So they're making more money, they're keeping themselves busy during the hockey season, and they're retaining their clients throughout the year for next year.
Gosh, I wasn't going to bring that one up, but that's another one is skating because it seems like there's a bunch of good skating coaches around me, but actually aligning with the right coach and the right logistics and geography and ice time that's at a time, that's at
Yep.
a time that fits with your overscheduled schedule, right? Seems to be impossible. And also the one-on-one or small group seems to be the most effective with skating, yet the most in demand people, they've got 30 people on the ice, right? And so I guess my question is, does skating need to be in person on the ice, or is there anything that can be done remotely? And also, like, skating is such a generic term. Like, I have no, even though I played the game for a long time, again, not like you or not like your dad, but like, I mean, played the game for decades, right?
Yep.
And I don't know how to assess,
Yeah.
like what is a good skating coach? What things should the kids be working on? What background should that person have? How important is it that they do hockey specific versus figure skating? Like, I just don't know, but it seems like skating's so fundamental to the game that blind spot bothers me.
Yeah, if you're, I think as a parent, it's the and that can be frustrating for you too. I think because skating is the biggest base of a hockey player, right? If you are a good skater, but you lack all these other skills, it's still going to open doors for you. If you're still the best skater in your group, it's gonna open so many doors for you. But skating is the hardest thing to be able to teach online, or tell this kid this is what you need to do. It's so hard to implement online because you really need to be able to see that kid and make these tweaks. I think on the spot. Um, that's the toughest thing to show a video online, and then a kid's going to be self-teaching themselves. I mean, skating in a sense, it's like watching a YouTube golf coach. These are the swings you need to do. These are the tips you need to make. Got it. Oh yeah, perfect. I'm gonna go to the range and do that. Well, I just whacked 50 balls and tried to do these tips. Nothing changed. I think that'd kind of be the same thing with skating. Is I watch these things. I got to do this T push and this kind of stuff. I'm gonna go implement it at practice today, and kind of forget everything that you just watched when you're there. You kind of need somebody in person to implement those. I think that'd be kind of tough to teach online, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So two last ones. One is think about all the handlers that an NHL player has, and I don't know that they do because I've never been in the NHL, right? And I don't know a lot of NHLers, although I'm getting to know more as I'm heading on this journey. But I would imagine, and tell me if I'm wrong, that they have access to a nutrition person and a sports psychologist and a strength person and a mobility person and a prehab person and a hockey IQ video, shift
Yep.
reviews and like whatever it is that they might need for their development, they probably have access to it. A lot of the younger kids don't. Now there's stuff for sure that's age appropriate, and there's also like, well, you don't need access to that tippy top when even if you just learn the basics from like, your neighbor who eats well, right? Then like
Yep.
that's enough. But what do you think about looking at what they have access to at the tippy top of the game and then figuring out a lightweight version and packaging that to introduce it to kids much younger, but at a price point that's much more affordable and accessible because it's, digital, automated, or some other way to kind of strip out costs and make it, at a price point that's more palatable.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I mean, in college, I was blessed that we're at such a well-funded and big school at the University of Minnesota that we had each individual person, strength coach, nutritionalist, therapy, physio, all these things was a different person. And then I go to the next level up in the East Coast League, and all of a sudden, one person is your nutritionalist, strength coach, physio. And then if you get to the AHL, well, now you have a nutritionalist, and it's kind of funny. Every level you go up has more people specializing in that. But I think that would be it would be helpful to show some guidance for that. Who you obviously have to get some specialists, right, to figure out what that looks like and to help guide that. because I think when I was growing up, it was just eat as much food as possible. You're growing, you're always hungry. Just eat as much
I
food as
remember the football
possible.
guys. Yeah, it was like, okay, we're gonna sit down, little Jimmy, and like, here's a loaf of bread, and I want you to eat the whole thing. If here's
Yeah.
some peanut butter and some jelly if you want it, but like one way or another, that loaf needs to go.
You need to
Yeah.
eat it. Yeah, my brother-in-law was a tight end at the University of Minnesota, and I think his playing weight was 285, and he hated it. Like he'd come over for dinner at our house, and he had to eat, and then he'd have to take home all these leftovers, and then when he got home, he had to eat again. He's not hungry, but he had to eat them, you know. And then 3 months out of college, he lost 60 pounds, because he wasn't force feeding like that. But um, I do think that would be helpful to have a tab of some sort of you're envisioning a tab that's nutrition. What age are you? What are you doing? Here's your kind of guidelines, recommendations. What are your goals? Are you underweight right now? When I was in high school, I was 6'3" and I was 140 pounds. So weight was an
Wow.
issue. Yeah, I had to get it packed on. So over the next few years, going into college, I got up to 190. So those next 4 or 5 years, I packed it on. But even when I was playing, I had a big frame, but I could never get to 200, 215, which that would have been nice to get to. But no matter what I ate, I couldn't do it. So I think that would be helpful for high schoolers, probably. Maybe not necessarily kids that are, um, peewees or squirts that are these young kids on the nutritional aspect. But once these kids really get into the gym and start eating and stuff, or start lifting and stuff and training hard, nutrition becomes a big factor. Because if you go to the gym and work out for 2 hours with the strength coach, but you go home and you don't eat and you don't eat the proper stuff, you're kind of throwing all that training you did just out the window.
And the last one is it's just something I'm wrestling with. I think, from there's so many resources that are now proliferating, and that is great in terms of helping grow the players and grow the game, but it also is a bit of an arms race, and competing with the Joneses, and there's burnout, but there's also just the accessibility thing that like this stuff is expensive and requires a lot of time. And I mean, we already talked about this earlier in the discussion, and um, if I were coming in purely with a capitalist mindset, I think that the best way to go may be to just like look to tap into the smallest number of deepest wallets, right? And be another hand grabbing at it, uh, and and further polarize the arms race of the haves and the have-nots,
Yep.
right? And that doesn't feel good to me. Like if
Yeah.
that's what this is going to be, like I don't want to do it, right? Like I want to take like in a way, Uber has its downsides, right? But one of the nice things is that like there's a lot of people that like would never have had a private black car, right? That can like drive in a, if they're going to the prom, they can take a private black car, and they didn't, it's like at a fraction of the price of what a private black car would have been, right? And so it's like grows the accessibility of private black cars. And maybe that's a bad example because who gives a shit for the world about if you grow the accessibility of private black cars, right? But if you grow for the kids and families that are serious, right, that aspire but for whatever reason don't have access, if you're growing the access, right, it's good for them and good for the game, and there's a noble mission to it, right? But if you're just like another hand grabbing at like the at the haves, right,
Yep.
and that further disadvantages the have-nots, right, then that doesn't feel good. Like, am I right to worry about that? And what advice do you have for me in terms of heading out on this journey to make sure that it ends up in a place that I can be proud of and feel good about?
Yeah, I love that you brought it up because yeah, what is your goal, right? Do you want to make money or do you want to impact development of the game? You know, you can do both. I think you can really do one or you can really do one, and that otherwise you can kind of do both probably down here, which I think that kind of sounds like more so what you want to do. But I uh, I really think the best way that you have to move with the new world. You can't fight against it, right? And I don't think you want to compete against it. So I think in the age of all these kids are starting to get advisors at 14 and 15 and stuff, I think you have to lean into that, but not as a money grab model. Maybe this thing starts becoming it's more of a member benefit kind of idea, and that you're partnering with agencies. If you partner with this agency that has these 40 advisors and they have these 5,000 kids, well, right away your platform is in front of 5,000 kids on day one, and maybe it is kids upload their, we were talking about the video. Maybe the kids upload their video into the system, and model one, whether AI breaks it down and then it's sent to their specific advisor. Their advisor sets their meeting time and they video review it. Okay, if there's kids that don't have advisors, they can upload their video into it. They can watch it by themselves with X's and O's and stuff like that for a reduced fee. If they want to pay an upgraded fee, well, now you pull in an advisor or a live person to review that footage with them, and now it's motivation for the advising company too, that, hey, I got this random kid. If I excel at this video session, I'm going to help this kid. This kid's going to want to work with us. It helps you guys. Hey, by the way, did you guys check out the nutritional tab? What are you doing for that? So I think that's something that you could really do is partner with advisors of some sort or an agency of some sort. Take the biggest one and ask them, what are you guys doing? Because they already have the market, they already have the kids, and it's such a benefit that they want to use this. And I think it just flows both ways. It's positive for both companies. So
Yeah, it's one of the nice things about doing this in public is that there's accountability to it, right? Not that I'm not saying there's zillions of people paying attention. Maybe nobody is, right? But just the fact that it's all like out in the public record, it's like you're not gonna. You might disagree with my intentions, but you're gonna know my intentions won't be up for debate. Like they'll be right there for the world to see, right? And that doesn't even always mean I'll get it right. But if I'm doing it in public, then hopefully, the mob will hold me accountable for that, and I'll course correct, right? Unless I want to get lynched. But yeah. And Jack, we didn't talk about what are you up to now, and where does the game fit into your life? You mentioned the coaching, and then what does the future have in store for you? I guess generally and hockey specific, to the extent that hockey does factor into your future.
Yeah. No, good questions, and thanks for asking. I'm about 4.5 years in with Players Health is the company I work for. We're an insurance organization and a risk management organization, so we work only with youth sports. So I'm an insurance broker on that side. So I work with organization X for brokering their insurance, but we also have a risk management arm that is helping with coach compliance, background checks, trainings, all this stuff. So it's kind of a one-stop shop for youth sports organizations, and just keeping organizations safe, athletes safe. So it's been really fun post-hockey to career to work in a sports-oriented company. So I've been doing that for about 4.5 years. Like I said, I've been coaching high school hockey the past 3 years, so I'm involved in that. I play in my normal weekly men's league skates like that. We formed a Minnesota team, and we went and played the Vale Yeti. They're a semi-pro men's league. Played in that this winter, so still involved in the game like that. I'm doing color commentary for the University of Minnesota. That last year was my.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah. Last year was my first year doing that. Frank Mazzocca was the longtime color commentator. He retired last year, so they pulled in a couple former players to do that. So I did about 8 games last year, and I'm doing that again this year. So that's something that I was a little uneasy about, very nervous about, and turned out I love this. I find so much enjoyment in it. Calling the game on the radio from up top and being involved in the game, getting to go down to the locker room and see former coaches, former trainers, and just be around the guys. That's something I found immense joy in. So I'm doing that again this year. That's doing that. Coaching, playing. I love hunting and fishing. You got my background right here. I got some skulls from previous hunts, so that keeps me very busy as well. So it's always a full slate.
Nice. Well, gosh, we covered so much ground. Is there anything I didn't ask that you wish I did, or any parting words for listeners?
Man, no, we bounced all over the place, which is so fun to kind of brainstorm and just talk about this stuff, right? As you just ping pong back and forth, and if you're hitting on an idea, you kind of dive into it. So it's really fun. I mean, for listeners, what a cool opportunity that you're kind of building this forward facing to the public, that they get to see that you usually don't get to see in detail of what you're doing. So, if I was somebody sitting on the side, I'd keep watching you, because you get to learn about business, how to potentially grow a company, and maybe get in at the ground level somehow. It's pretty cool that just reading the blogs and stuff like that I've never seen something done like this. So it's pretty cool to follow, and I'm excited to keep following it, and I really appreciate you having me on.
It's pretty weird, yeah. And I already did this in another space for the last 7 years, and now I'm kind of bringing it to the hockey world. And I was really nervous about it because youth hockey has become a really big part of my life, but totally separate from this like alter ego of this like public facing weird whatever I am, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm bringing that to hockey, and that, I don't know, like that is a nervous thing for me, but it's also exciting because the game has become such a big part of my life, and in many ways coming full circle, because it was a big part of my life when I was little, and then business took over, and then hockey was dormant, but then it got reawakened with my kid, and then every year it's been getting more and more, and it seems like it's going to even surpass what it was when I was a kid, right? So it's just a really, I'm getting older, and I mean, I don't plan to ever retire, but like I am probably in the last third of my career, right? And it just seems like such a fitting way to bring it home is to make my last chapter about hockey. So
Yeah,
I just
that's
feel really
awesome.
blessed for that opportunity.
It's really, really awesome. Yeah, that's so fun to do something that's so close to your heart and that you're passionate about. So,
Well, Jack, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, and looking forward to watching your progress, professionally and with the game, and we'll keep you posted as well. No doubt you'll be a valuable sounding board along the way. So thanks again.
yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it.